So this is all yours. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jaspreet. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Excited to be here with you today. I think part of this session, one thing I've learned as I've kind of worked with customers as well as worked and connected with a lot of people in the community is there's a lot of still fundamental, foundational topics that people sometimes get stuck with. And I want to make sure as part of this session that we go through some of the foundational elements of Purview. So if a few of you that are experienced, level 300, 400 in Purview, this session might not be for you. This session is more for those that are now responsible as either an IT pro or as a developer or as an administrator, now responsible for managing Purview within their environment. And this is one of the many jobs that they have. So this is meant to be a practical guide for managing Microsoft Purview and trying to understand what those features are and what are the fundamentals of it. Excited to be part of Microsoft Purview and Defender Days, and I think there's surveys that are going to be happening and also prizes that are going to be happening. So make sure you stick around for those prizes. Well, I think being a technologist, probably the biggest thing that we look at is how technology allows all of us and each of us to connect. For example, all of you are on Microsoft Teams today, connecting and watching this presentation. We're going to be sharing some ideas. We're going to be sharing potentially some chat messages as well. And there are going to be times in your organization that you're also having video calls, you're sharing data, you're connected to third-party systems. And we kind of are amazed at the magic that happens with tech. But we also lose sight sometimes, a lot of people do lose sight of the tech that goes behind it. And most importantly, making sure that as we're collaborating both inside and outside the organization, that data is protected and it's secure and the right people have access to it on the right devices and the right services that they're connecting to. Data usage is exploding. This stat that I'm sharing here, about 163 zettabytes of data being created and replicated. This stat was provided a little bit more than 3 years ago. However, in that time, I think we've had this huge explosion of generative AI, and the increase of data is just kind of exponentially growing and growing. It's not just the increase of structured data; it's the increase of unstructured data. Whether you're in a private cloud, a public cloud, working with Microsoft tech or outside of Microsoft tech, there's a huge explosion of that data. So the job and the responsibility of discovering and managing data is becoming more and more challenging. Organizations are just kind of losing confidence on how to detect and prevent loss of sensitive data. There's continues to be a huge focus on security, more and more. I think Satya Nadella within Microsoft just recently had shared, the company priorities. As you guys know, Microsoft is kind of laser focused on implementing and helping improve the adoption of AI through Copilot. However, Satya Nadella mentioned in his kind of email to employees that if you had to pick between Copilot and security, security needs to be prioritized because as the explosion of data is happening, as the explosion of these different systems are connected, security is becoming more and more, not just central, but more and more prevalent to the needs of people that are using the tech. So today, the number one priority is protecting and governing sensitive data. And the biggest concern is, can you comply with regulations? Do you understand and are you connected to all the different regulations that are available? The other challenge that you run into is regulation is increasing. The cost of complying with privacy regulations. I've had a lot of opportunities and customers that I've worked with in the past 10 years to work on HIPAA compliance and GDPR and understanding both the regulations and how they apply in the technology. It takes quite a bit of work. Microsoft's investing quite a bit into that and helping provide templates and patterns for being compliant, but also giving you the tool set to make it your own. And then, of course, with the AI explosion that we're seeing, you're going to have more and more global AI regulations. Just in the last year, there's been the European Legal Framework for AI that's been introduced, UK's AI Safety Institute, the US, and many other countries, both having local, regional, as well as global policies and regulations in place, and how data that's generated through AI is managed and governed. So as somebody who's going to be responsible for overseeing a lot of these, you're going to have a number of challenges, and I want to give you a bit of a framework. Number one is in terms of protecting your sensitive data, you're going to want to know that the intent and the process of discovering sensitive data and where it lives is going to be your number one priority. Knowing where people are, where content is going to be important. For example, if you have an employee who's stored a customer's social security number in an unprotected site or a third-party cloud without your knowledge, that can be a huge issue. I think the number of people that are getting hacked, it continues to get increased as well. So making sure you understand the risks. The biggest risks around data is data exposure events, where data is left in vulnerable places, both online as well as on-prem environments. So the only way to kind of understand your sensitive data is making sure you understand where it's stored through a data discovery process. Number two kind of challenge you're going to run into is classifying data. You have to understand the type of data that you have, not just once you know where the data is, but you need to now understand and assign a value for a starting point from a governance point of view. The data classification process involves kind of determining how sensitive the data is, the impact of business impact, as well as understanding and being knowledgeable about the risks themselves. Microsoft does use some classifications. We'll go through that a little bit later in the presentation, but that's really, really important. Number three is going to be protecting your important data, just understanding that once you've classified the data, are you protecting it and how are you protecting it? Whether you're working with a chief data officer, your CISO, they are accountable for protecting information and providing some of those policies. You need to make sure that as you apply policies and classify data, that it doesn't hinder, doesn't make the productivity of employees and users, it doesn't hinder it. You still want the magic behind the tech to be magical, where people are using the tech without necessarily realizing all the stuff that's happening behind it. So you want to make sure the policies that are put in place provide a really good balance between security and ease of use. One of the fastest emerging needs today is data leakage protection. So you're going to also want to understand how you actually restrict data that is now secure and when it leaves the environment, or when it leaks, the data leaks outside of your environment that's managed. How do you protect it as well? And the last but not least is just governing data, ensuring that your data is discoverable, it's accurate, it's tested, it can be protected, and just understanding like how necessary is with the huge amount of data that you have, that as it gets exposed to a breach, are you able to manage it? You don't necessarily want people to delete the data too quickly, putting your organization at risk with regulatory violations. So as we kind of dive a little bit deeper here into this, I want everyone to kind of understand, like, the intent is not just the tech. The intent is just not knowing all the latest features that are available in Purview, in Defender, but it's also understanding as an organization, as a team, where you want to go. You want to be able to work towards a trend of where, if you're currently as an organization in phase 0, where you have working towards just making sure your data is siloed, meaning it's protected and making sure the right teams have access to it. What you're really getting to is not phase 0. You're trying to get to phase 3, which is enabling and empowering your teams, your data scientists, even your employees, to be able to create and understand the data, create reports from it, and be able to make accurate data-driven decisions so they can help the organization kind of grow. So we're trying to get to that place of ready-made data objects for everyone. And I think a lot of organizations are on this journey. Whether you're a company of less than 100 employees or you're 100,000 employees, you're going to have a challenge where there's going to be pockets of good data governance practice in place, and pockets where you're not going to have good data governance and compliance in place as well. So make sure you continue kind of understanding how data is being accessed, how it's being discovered, how it's being managed, and how it's being governed. My name's Kanwal Khipple. A pleasure here, kind of connecting with you all. I, in the day of kind of knowledge and content, I'm passionate of continuing to learn. I'm not necessarily an expert in all things. I'm a learner in all things, and I continue to kind of invest both personal time and work time into learning and adapting. So I'm looking forward, hopefully, to learning from you as well. So if you have questions or a scenario, please make sure you ask for it in chat or get off mute. And yeah, excited to connect with all of you as well. I'll be sharing my LinkedIn profile, and I'm on Twitter as well. So excited to connect and learn a little bit more. For today's session, I know we have about 40 minutes or so. So today's session, we're just going to go through a little bit about information protection strategy. We're going to go through data classification and protection, and then practical tips. I think given the audience and given the content, we might spend a little bit of time on strategy and just focus on a few content and slides and data classification, but spend a little bit more time on some of the practical tips that we've seen that have helped, and then hopefully get a chance to learn from you as well. What are those practical tips as well? This presentation slide deck is going to be available. I should be sharing it with the organizers, but if you do want the rest of the slides, if we skip through them too quick, and you want to kind of revisit that or reuse it for yourself, please feel free to reach out. Happy to share the content if it does benefit and valuable. All right, so from a strategy perspective, if we dive in here, your information protection strategy, there's 3 key things that you need to understand and ask yourself. Do you know, number one, do you know where your business critical and sensitive data is residing and what's being done with it? A lot of organizations, whether small organizations, medium, large, continue to have pockets, if not large pockets of content where they don't know where it is. One tip that I can give you is if you're trying to understand where your data resides, there's 2 ways to do it. There are tools that are available to help you kind of discover some of that data and how the connectivity is happening and where data is residing through discovery. Another way you can also do it that can be very complementary to the tools is actually reaching out to the departments, reaching out to your teams and just asking them, helping them, maybe sending out a survey or having a quick connect with them to ask where the data is being resided. Number 2, do you have control of this data that is traveling inside and outside your organization? Sharing externally has always been easy. In the past and still today, you can share a lot of data through email and just attach it as a document and send the email out. You can still majority download documents and then upload them to your OneDrive and then share it through that. You can download documents and upload it to another data sharing service and share with that, with the individuals that you're working with, whether it's inside or outside your organization. This relatively still happens today for a lot of companies where the security and the data governance policies are too strict, and users and people will always find a way around some of those restrictions. So make sure you find a good balance between how you're restricting content, whether it's on your SharePoint sites or anywhere else. And then number 3, a common challenge that we run into as part of your information protection strategy that you should be considering is, are you using multiple solutions to classify, label, and protect sensitive data? Very few organizations are just investing into Purview. Quite a bit of them are investing into more than 2 kind of data governance and compliance solutions. You have to make sure you take a kind of inventory of what those are and understand what is one solution doing over another, because we've run into scenarios where data has now been so secured and locked that nobody can really access it because 2 of the different applications are both trying to govern it. From a principles to protecting and governing your data, number 1, you got to make sure you know your data. I'm going to continue iterating this because this continues to be an area where when we do a discovery, when we try to find data internally, there are pockets of data that people did not know content resided. So continue to know your data. The other principle here is make sure you're protecting your data, applying flexible protection actions such as encryption, access restrictions, as well as visual markings. So make sure you're protecting it in some flexible ways. Preventing data loss is also going to be a big area. So detecting risky behavior, preventing accidental oversharing. If a new employee is joining, or let's say an employee is offboarding from an organization, there can be some risky behavior there. So make sure you're being aware and have the right kind of controls in place to notify you if the behavior kind of changes. So preventing data loss becomes a huge priority. And then, of course, governing your data, automatically retaining, deleting, storing your data and your records in a compliant manner. This is also important, but also, again, managing it in a manner that is not it doesn't end up overcomplicating things as well. So most organizations, when you ask them where is their data stored, they'll typically highlight a lot of the on-prem content that they have, the Microsoft 365 apps that they have that they're using, their SharePoint teams, Exchange, SharePoint Online, and Power BI or Fabric workspaces. It's the non-Microsoft Cloud and SaaS apps that sometimes not everybody has visibility over, where pockets of departments and users are using non-sanctioned areas to store content and share content. So you're going to find that sensitive data continues to reside in a lot of sources that you might not be aware of. So taking that inventory and trying to understand it and where it lives is going to be really, really important. There are data discovery tools that are available both for the cloud as well as for on-prem files. Make sure you do a data discovery kind of component in your projects. Whether it's a one-time thing, ideally it's something that you run a little bit more on a frequent basis, just to discover and identify the content and the files that are sensitive. I think the important part also here that I want to highlight is sensitive data is a key here. Not all data necessarily needs to be governed, but you need to understand where data is before you start applying some rules around the data itself. So understanding the business risk first helps you prioritize what kind of controls you want to put in place. I know it can get really overwhelming sometimes when you're trying to do a data governance project for the volume of data that you're looking at, whether it's terabytes of data or you're looking at petabytes of data, that you need to come up with some very clear kind of policies that apply to certain high-risk data first before you start applying it elsewhere. There is also cloud app security. Most of you might be familiar on the call as well, but you can detect content in cloud storage services. You can apply sensitivity labels and enforce protection policies. Not everyone is necessarily aware of those, so just want to highlight that. You can discover and classify some of your existing cloud apps. One thing that's helpful, that's important as you onboard users and people that are part of your data governance engagement, to make sure they understand the life cycle of protected content. So just quickly highlight here, number one, generally when data is created is when your life cycle starts. Yes, is there a question?
Hey, Kanwal, Nihal this side. Okay, so if you remember
Yeah.
earlier, there was a feature on Microsoft where the data, if it is on-prem, okay, when you like discover the data and classify the data, so you get a complete visibility like what data, what type of data has been classified on your environment. But currently that feature is not available. Only you get the information about like how many files have been classified.
Yeah, do you remember the feature name, Nihal?
I don't know the feature name, but earlier it was like that. I think yeah, before 2022, it was like when you get it gives you the complete visibility, like what type of file you have on your on-premises. Okay, but now it just give you a count, like okay, these many files are there, and these many files has been classified with these labels.
Are you talking about Azure Information Protection, the old
Uh,
version?
maybe it is with Azure Information Protection, but now with Microsoft Information Protection or with Microsoft Purview, that feature is not there if you classify the data on your on-prem.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the
Is there
feature.
okay? That's what I'm asking. Is there any feature so we can get a complete visibility? Okay, this is the data which is stored on-prem, and like this type of data you have. Is there any that type of like okay, there is a personal PI information or something like your what you can say, yeah,
I'll make it.
something.
I'll make a note of that, Nihal, and a follow up in the chat here with you as well. Feature
Okay.
to access and understand your on-prem data.
Okay.
A great question. Yeah, I'm trying to remember that one as well, which one it was. Yeah, I'll look that up right after at the tail end of this presentation. Great question, Nahal. Thank you. Yeah, I think the Content Explorer is kind of the area. I'm just trying to remember which features, especially now with the compliance portal redesign, which features based on licenses and based on like what they're making available is available today. We'll follow up on that. Great call up. Thank you, Nahal. And yeah, if there's any questions as well, team, that you have, please feel free to go off mute and ask those as well. Data being created. Oh, sorry, is there another one? Okay. Data is being created, imported, modified for various locations. First step that you want to do is make sure you're able to detect that data from your devices, your cloud services, your other environments as well. And then make sure that sensitivity data is being classified and labeled. So that's the general life cycle of 1, 2, 3. Make sure you detect it, and then you classify and label that data. Once you've classified it and labeled it, then you want to make sure you start protecting that as well. So protecting that data based on policy. There's a lot of different ways of protecting it. We'll kind of highlight some of those as part of this presentation. And then number 5 is data is traveling across all these different locations. So you've detected it, you've classified it, now you're protecting the data. Data is being protected. And this is where you kind of lean on Purview and other tools to do that. Then the next part is then data now is protected, and now it can travel between the different services as well. So protection, you want to make sure is persistent and travels with your data. And as it's doing that, you're going to want to understand kind of data sharing, reporting, and usage as well, potential abuse, and you want to be able to take action on that and remediate that. And then number 7, sorry, is going to be around retaining and expired deleted data. What is that life cycle of what happens also when data is expiring or data is being deleted? Amazing, thank you. All right, Nihal, hopefully you got the answer in the chat as well. Thanks, Jasith, for sharing the deployment scanner for Purview. A lot of teams, as I was mentioning earlier, a lot of teams are, and you might be part of these as well. You're assigned to protect the data. However, you're doing a job of many. And what we've seen in the last little bit, customers we worked on, this is not an area that we specialize in, but customers we worked on, sometimes what ends up happening is you've protected the data, you've got very limited resources assigned to managing it, but then you get hit with some security breach or ransomware. And now you're trying to really react to the situation, trying to find out how to get your data back or side to it as well. So a lot of companies initially don't invest into the right people and the right skill sets to manage their data. But it's not until they hit that risk of having a security breach, some sort of ransomware hitting their environment, and now having to deal with the ramifications. So can't stress it enough that if you are in a position where you have too much on your plate and you feel like you're not able to effectively do this, to make sure you raise your hand, ask for help, and continue highlighting this to your leadership team, to your manager, that whether it's a data admin, whether it's a data owner, information workers, everyone from your CSIO to your compliance officer, everyone needs to be part of the information protection governance lifecycle. So you need to make sure you have a very clear team in place to support that. This is an overview of Microsoft Purview information protection that hopefully kind of gives you a view of all the pieces that are connected. On the left-hand side, you've got the different devices and services that people interact with. You've got the different tools that you can kind of leverage through Office 365 / Microsoft 365. You've also got endpoint DLP as well that can help with basically endpoint systems that you have, from USBs to your Bluetooth to your RDP, just ways that people are connecting that might not necessarily be services or devices that you have sanctioned, but people are leveraging them. On the right, you have the different applications from Defender for cloud apps to your on-premise environments to your Purview data governance, different services, Azure, Amazon, etc. And at the bottom, what you have is your compliance solutions from your e-discovery, insider risk management, communication compliance, Microsoft Purview. You have a lot of different areas and a lot of different ways that you can focus your data security and data governance applications. All these center around the core, which is your sensitive information types, as well as your sensitivity labels. So we're just going to touch upon that just a little bit as part of your data classification and protection. There are a number of slides on that, and I think just in given the time that we have, I'm going to go to, given the time that we have, there's quite a few slides here that kind of go into sensitivity labels, DLP, and usually when you have a little bit more time, it's good to kind of dive into some of those. But what I will highlight first and foremost is Purview portal ends up becoming really, really helpful. And just recently they've done a redesign on it. So this is actually quote unquote the classic Purview portal. There's a newer modern redesigned portal that's available. But from the Context Explorer to the Activity Explorer to many of these kind of data classification tools that are available, have a look at those. Those are already up and running in your environment. Even if you don't have the Purview licenses, you can leverage these and just kind of see what Purview is kind of finding in your environment. It will highlight to you different data types that are available, things that it's seeing from statement of work to agreements to legal agreements that are available. It'll highlight all the content it's been able to classify through its trainable classifiers. Have a look at that. And then it also look at sensitive information types as well across your content. So it'll determine where there's been social security numbers, where there's been medical information, personally identifiable information that's been surfaced up. So if you haven't today explored it, do encourage that. If you have explored it and you're now working with somebody, walk them through this initial screen as well, kind of starting with the overview and then going through the Content Explorer and Activity Explorer. Be really, really helpful and educational for them to kind of understand all the content that's being found today. Sensitive data. There's different types of sensitive data. I think we all kind of understand credit card numbers. We all understand probably personally identifiable information, things like home address and date of birth. Social security numbers, of course, are very important as well. So making sure those are protected. Another type of sensitive data sometimes some smaller organizations don't necessarily protect is their intellectual IP, intellectual property that they have, the corporate IP. So product schematics, any sort of solutions or products that they purchase or made in-house, documentation that they have that identify kind of their secret sauce to what they do to see if that's been protected as well. So that's one that Purview might not necessarily highlight as part of the discovery. It will highlight things like credit card numbers and the PII information, the SSNs, but it might not identify IP. And then the last one is kind of protected health information as well. Your medical record information, that might be there as well. All right, yeah, if there's a question around the different sensitivity data information here as well, please just go off mute. As I was mentioning earlier, the core is the sensitive information types. That's at the core of understanding Purview. Oh yes, go for it, please. Hey, I think Senthil, do you have a question? There's a great question here from Jasjeet. How do you tackle false identification? In some cases, in some scans, Purview finds way too many SSN numbers that are actually present. Great question. False positive matching happens really often, quite a bit. We run into that scenario with a lot of customers, even on our own tenant at ToLead. We're running into scenarios where a document that we were about to share with a customer externally gets marked saying it has a social security number in there as well. So when that classification comes, when that report, that alert comes up, whoever is managing Purview will get a notification as well. And what they can do is they can go to Purview, and those false positives, they can review them and basically individually kind of mark whether they are accurate or inaccurate in terms of their classification. So that's one thing you can do manually. And there are ways, essentially what you're trying to look at is you've got a certain format. If you look at these, let me just zoom in here. So the sensitive information types, when you go to the classifiers, there are some formats, for example, ABA routing number, or the Australian bank account number, or your physical addresses. Each of these have a certain definition. Let me just show you the definition. This might be a good way to go through some of these slides here. Let me go here, and let me go to the definition of when you're defining. I'll answer this question as I kind of go through these slides. So if we go to any of these classifiers, you can create copies of these classifiers. And let me see, here you go. So when you're creating a sensitive information type, what you're trying to do is provide a definition of what that is. So there's some things that are out of the box, and there's some that you can create yourself as well. So of course you're providing the name, the description, but you're also providing a pattern. What is that pattern for a social security number? And countries have different patterns for those as well. And what you're essentially trying to determine is what is the primary element, what's the supporting element, and then what's the confidence level for that element as well. So the primary and the secondary or supporting elements are relatively easy to identify what that data is. Usually it's a regular expression that you're trying to do, or some sort of keyword dictionary lookup, or some sort of function. You're trying to do that, but the key here is the confidence level. So we'll have a look at how you can actually define the custom sensitive information types. There's a number of different ways you can do that. Using PowerShell, you can create kind of scripts that identify what the rule is, what the entity is, and then the different confidence levels. So lower confidence, medium confidence, and higher confidence. Now, these are just meant to be 3 basic standard confidence levels that you can identify. And what you notice here is for the lower confidence, you're like, as long as it matches this regular expression, there's some good confidence there, great. But if it matches the regular expression and it also includes a date, for example, a variable in there, it includes that kind of data type, we have a little bit more confidence. However, for higher confidence, it's not just a regular expression, it's a date, but it's also other keyword lists, lookups that you have, other data repositories, other lookups that you're doing from a keyword list 1, keyword list 2, then you have higher confidence. So you can specify as part of your data types those definitions. Here's a quick little look at the XAML here. So you notice the confidence level is 75%, and what it's highlighting, or sorry, confidence level here is 65%, and you're specifying that here's a regular expression for an employee ID. Confidence level is 75%, so you're getting to like medium confidence. It's not just employee ID, but it's also some sort of functional, it's also some date format that you're looking at as well. And then if it's a higher confidence, you can specify it's not just the employee ID, the date, but also it's, you're able to reference their badge number. You're also able to reference them off of another system and look up an employee record as well. So you can increase and look at the different confidence levels to review that for the custom ones that you're building. So as you're kind of building these and looking at these sensitive information types, for the ones that are custom out of the box, you can define the confidence levels. For the ones that are out of the box where you're getting mismatches, it's about going back and flagging those one at a time, or also potentially going through and retraining them based off of the data set. So those are kind of some of the ways to do that. Hope that helps in terms of the question that you asked, team. Next up is not just data that you're sharing, but it's also documents that you're sharing as well. So when you look at the capabilities for documents, a common scenario is like a patent template. You have a document where there's a patent template, inventors, as well as description that are mapped out in that document. And what you're doing here is part of the document fingerprinting for sensitive information types. you can set up policies for your DLP to state any document that contains a patent title, inventors, and description. We're going to go ahead and create a fingerprint for that. That's a patent type of document. And then now we're going to apply that SIT to all the other documents. And if it identifies those, we're gonna map it and say this is another example of the patent document as well. So you can start associating the fingerprints with a DLP policy, and then start highlighting and having that DLP policy kick in whenever patent documents are being shared across as well. So this is another kind of great feature that's available. All right. I'm gonna see what else is good to highlight. I think one thing that's important to highlight here is there's trainable classifiers that are manually that you can create, automated pattern matching that you can also do. And then there's also just general classifiers, categorization method for content that isn't easily identifiable. And you can use this method to identify items that are not necessarily matching by the element. So there's different categories for whether it's the trainable classifiers for the SITs that are available as well. There are a number of different classifiers that are available. Let me just go to present mode, apologies. So pre-trained classifiers that are already available that come kind of out of the box are things like invoices, bank statements, content or images that are adult, racy, or gory in nature. The Microsoft teams are constantly working to create some of these pre-trained classifiers so that they're available for customers globally. You can create your own trainable classifier, similar to what we're looking at from a fingerprint functionality point of view. You can create your own trainable classifiers. It does require quite a bit of seeding and quite a bit of testing. So you need to collect between 50 to 500 seeded content initially. You must have a limited sample that represents the type of content you want to train and identify against that category. Then you need to collect at least 200 test content items. The maximum here is 10,000 for the best results. And these should be a mix between strong positives, strong negatives, and some that are going to be a little bit less obvious in nature. So it's not meant to be, if you're creating a trainable classifier for a statement of work, you don't want 200 documents or 10,000 documents that are all statement of work, right? You want some strong positives as well as some strong negatives as well, and some kind of a gray area content there as well. Microsoft will present you 30 items at a time, and you essentially need to review them and say, are these relevant? Are these not relevant? And basically go through yes or no, not sure, or skip the item. And then this model accuracy gets updated automatically every 30 items. And part of this process, you should review at least 200, at least 200 of these content items for that trainable classifier. So as you're looking at, number one, you've already got Purview today, and you're using a lot of the out-of-the-box features, but now you're saying, hey, there's some sort of corporate IP kind of content that you want to start classifying, or there's some custom data type that you want to start classifying that's specific to your organization. The custom classifiers can help you kind of identify that content. There's a process to create those custom classifiers. So part of that process is, it's not something that just happens overnight. It's a little bit of an involved process. So I just want to go through the timeline here. When you're starting, first time that you opt into trainable classifiers, it takes about 12 days for that content the trainable classifiers to be set up. And then it's about a day for you to collect seed 50 to 500 positive samples, most probably generally in a SharePoint online folder. Once you've done that, the index or crawls usually takes about 24 hours, sometimes less, to go through and index all that content. And then you're creating your classifier, you're processing that seed data, which takes up to about a day for you to do and map out the definitions. Then you collect all that test data into SharePoint online folder. And then now you're going through, as you've looked at all the 10,000 or so documents, now you're going to spend about 10 days probably, and this can vary. Some orgs will take 5 days to do it because they've got a few people going through testing positive marking things that are strong or not strong against a classifier. We essentially need to spend about 2 weeks to review the positives and negatives sample for testing. Once you're happy with the results, the model's been clarified, then you go ahead and publish that. And then from there, you can use those trainable classifiers to set up retention policies. And that usually takes about a week. So it's about a 30-day or so process to get from day one to continuing consistently. And what we find generally for organizations between 30 to 60 days to go through this entire process and have it in place. By the time you get to the end of it, that's when it starts getting involved, where your users, your employees are now starting to see the data getting flagged and tagged. And there might be times where it was inaccurately flagged as well. So you're going to want to go back to kind of seeding and testing out some more of that data. So you might need to go back to testing and reviewing additional data and improving the model accuracy. All right. Hope that helps a little bit in terms of just the process of flagging it manually, as well as kind of going back through that process itself. There are some common scenarios in terms of when you want to implement some of the SITs and the use case scenarios for those. And you kind of use these procedures and adapt them to your needs as well. So for sensitive information types, things like phone numbers and signatures, one common scenario is when you're unable to detect a credit card number, because the credit card number sometimes people will try to get around your information, your sensitive information types, because they just want to share a credit card number with somebody. So a common scenario might be they put spaces in between their content, or they put little flags between it, or little delimiters as well between it. And the out-of-the-box credit card definition won't detect it. So you have to make sure you're going through and validating a lot of this content and making sure you have your policy set up correctly. You can spend a lot of time in Purview setting up these different SITs and improving the regular expressions and trying to look at all the edge use cases. One thing that we found sometimes really effective is technology doesn't necessarily always solve everything in the way that people share. People will generally find ways to get around some of the protection that you have in place. And you have to find that balance. And we find one really simple scenario that is effective is if you're looking to share credit card information, besides having out of the box and even some of your own specialized kind of policies in place sensitive information types in place, it might be worthwhile educating your employees to say, hey, if you're going to share the credit card numbers, you're going to share passwords, maybe just pick up the phone and share that with the individual. Because the one-time thing that you can do, it's probably not worthwhile to share it through email, for example, because that information can be then passed on to others. So finding ways as part of your implementation of Purview to encourage people to kind of change a little bit of the behavior and how they share goes a long way. Another common scenario, like I was saying earlier, was passwords. Some companies will text you the password. Some companies will call you up and share that. Sometimes they'll share that through a separate email. So there's ways that you can adapt the current way that you're sharing sensitive information to find a good balance that people kind of aren't trying to ways where they're playing around with a data set and just finding innovative ways to share data that they shouldn't be sharing. All right, so yeah, just wanted to kind of highlight sensitive information types are at the core of everything that you want to do in Purview, everything. And understanding both those that are available out of the box, the ones that you're going to create custom, or that you're going to create through many ways. We just looked at PowerShell. There's other ways where, for example, you want to create data based off of your enterprise data that's available, your SQL databases, your databases as well. You can do that as well. But yeah, this is the core. So wanted to make sure people understand this before we dive into like sensitivity labels or retention labels or insider risk management, etc. All right, so I think I should. I'd love to continue diving in deeper into sensitivity labels. Maybe I'll just highlight one or two things, and I hope it's okay. I'm going to be clearly I'm going to be over time here. sensitivity
4 minutes
labels.
left, so yeah.
4 minutes left. Okay, so I'm gonna dive and be, I'm gonna assume a few of you have, quite a few of you have some of that knowledge of the foundational things around sensitivity labels and data loss protection, and we'll jump into practical tips, and we'll just go through those really quickly. If you'd like this, again, content slides, please feel free to reach out. You've got sensitivity information types, you got sensitivity labels. When you bring those together, that's when you can do a lot of, some of the magic here. So your inputs reflect your the behavior that you want to instill in people. We'll go through this quick. Okay, keep your labels simple. Organizations, and when you ask business users, they will give you a lot of scenarios where they want to do more than like 5 labels, more than 6 labels. So start with something simple like 3 labels and then work your way up. Make sure when you're starting out, require your users to apply labels. A really healthy setting as a starting point to kind of encourage people to get involved. Another common tip, practical tip, is apply your default labels as well. So making sure certain documents, let's say finance documents, you want to apply a label. You know those need to be protected a certain way. And you want to apply labels to that as well. You can set expiration settings. So if you want to limit how long people have access to the content, you can specify a date, a number of days where access eventually will be expired. So you can do that as well. Another good feature that's worthwhile is like just giving users the ability to pick the permissions. Sometimes that can be challenging. So it's a good starting point, but if it can be challenging, then you can actually go ahead and set up assigning permissions kind of immediately to the content. Make sure you're looking at externally sharing sensitive data. So if you know there's certain sites, one example, for example, OneDrive becomes a very common site where you're like OneDrive content is being shared externally. You have to, as a company, understand, do we want to restrict externally sharing documents in OneDrive? Some companies say, yes, OneDrive content is your personal content, should not be shared externally. Some other companies like, hey, we have our SharePoint sites, etc., restricted, but OneDrive, we're going to allow some of that external sharing. So make sure you go through that on your end. When you're classifying some data, you might want to restrict that data from being shared with everyone, or you want it to be blocked with only people outside your organization or certain people as well. So there are ways to implement that. We'll definitely encourage you both to find ways to restrict it and then also educating your users. One tip here is that when you're blocking externally shared data, you can also include like a phone number. Large orgs include like a phone number to reach out to help desk, or an email to reach out to help desk to get support. So if they see a document in their inbox or in that document that they're viewing and they notice it's been blocked from sharing externally, but they need to share it, give them a way to kind of reach out and maybe get an exception to that sharing limitation. Okay, involve your stakeholders early so you can understand it. Don't immediately go towards controlling and restricting your environment. Get some of the business users involved, especially when you're doing like pilots for your data itself. Get stakeholders involved early. Make sure you're identifying good use cases and good tools for this. Purview is one of the many tools that you want to leverage. Defender and others that you want to look at as well. And then just prioritize communication. Make sure people understand what's coming up, and make sure you're constantly finding a way to get user feedback. And then, of course, a lot of times on these projects, you want to have a very clear set of activities and when things are going to happen. So making sure you have a detailed project plan and a good governance plan in place. A governance plan essentially is policies and procedures when there are exceptions, what to do when somebody raises a concern that data is too restricted or should be restricted a little bit more, how to handle that. So your governance team, your compliance team can kind of have a clear next steps and direction. Okay, thank you so much. I really appreciate everyone joining. Just as a next step, if you're going to look at Purview and or you are looking at it today, adoption, data governance, making sure you're getting the right people involved for adoption, making sure people have very clear understandings from emails, email banners, signatures to, if you're in a physical environment, posters really help with end user training. For data governance, make sure you understand and implement Purview effectively. Make sure you're consistently assessing your environment and providing recommendations, and also looking at enabling for core scenarios, so your sensitivity labels. There is a really good GitHub solution available for understanding your DLP and other kind of reports that are available. That some out of the box reports might not give you everything that you need. It's available on GitHub. It's the MPARR reports that are available, done by Purview MVP. So please make sure you check out those Purview reports. Really good way to kind of see some of the data and just reflect on it, and all this data that's already been collected. All right. Thank you so much. Really appreciate the time. And yeah, looking forward to staying connected and engaged with you guys. Appreciate it. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Kanwal. All right.
That flew by fast.
Yes, that time did went by fast. I wish I would have given you more time earlier.